Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
Hey guys, our Series 8 sponsors are Floret. They're a farmer-owned cooperative who believe in selecting only the finest, freshest salad mixes, delivering the best salads naturally full of flavour. Did you know their salad bags can be recycled at supermarket soft plastic recycling areas as well? Why not create all kinds of recipes with salad leaves, but how will you make your dish unfloretable?
Guest on the podcast today is organic no-dig gardener, plant-based cook, award-winning author and small-scale homesteader, Steph Hafferty. Well known in the world of horticulture, Steph has a large following of gardeners eager to learn what the no-dig approach is all about, and we know that everyone at home also wants to know what it's all about, so can't wait to chat with Steph. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Hello.
You've gone all shy now.
All of a sudden, Steph was like, hi.
So, Steph, I know you're a really busy lady, so thank you for coming on to the podcast today. But I want you to kind of tell us the kind of rough trajectory of your career. And did you start off gardening when you were young? Give us a little kind of potted history of how you got into plants, please.
Okay, well, yeah, when I was, according to my mum, I've always grubbed in the mud. That's her term. So when I was
that should be your autobiography name.
I should use it, shouldn't I? Yeah. So when I was very little, I was always in the garden grubbing about. And then I got into growing cacti and succulents on my windowsill. Okay. So this is when I'm primary age. I had a big collection of those. In the end, I think they went to my little brother. Yeah. But I liked being outside and going out and about and things. I've always been an outdoors type person. But when I was about 17, I came across a book in a charity shop, which was all about making homemade wine. And I bought it. It was a really old book from like the 50s. And I discovered from this you could grow things to make alcohol. And I was 17. And so I managed to get the equipment as well from a charity shop. And I started to grow things in like a corner of my parents' garden, basically to make drink. But it did mean also I learnt foraging. So, but yeah, so when
there's benefits. I love the fact that you started growing because you thought you could grow booze. I mean, basically, I wonder how many young people think that, oh yeah, I could just maybe grow some hops and make my own beer or some grapes.
But, you know, so, and it was really, you know, it's quite a nice thing to do. And in my bedroom, I had the demijohns and everything bubbling away. And so it's started with that. And then when I went to university, I took all these demijohns of homebrew with me. So I was the only person, I think, that went with like lots of demijohns of wine. But I then as I got into making more food, because I had to, otherwise I'd have starved to death as a student, I then got more into the idea of growing plants so you could eat them rather than drink them. And,
fair enough.
So I did a bit, and gradually, I mean, it was hard enough as a student. I was in Bristol, so the odd plant herb or whatever on the windowsill. But then once I moved to the countryside again, when I started a job as a teacher in Northamptonshire, I was teaching English literature and that. I had a bit of garden, so I started growing then. So it's been quite a long time.
Well, we won't put any years on it, but basically, since you were young, you have been interested in plants, and
Basically,
for their
yeah.
kind of edible purposes more than cut flowers, would you say?
Yeah, once I got past the cacti phase, it was pretty much, I like things you can do things with. So you either eat them or use them to make a dye, or make, drinks, or make something for your skin. It basically was the fault of partly The Good Life, watching that as a child.
Yeah.
So that was just like, this is for me. Although I do want Margot's outfits. I just really quite fancy swanning around.
I used to love that. I used to love that show.
And also I read things like Little House on the Prairie. And in there's a lot of discussion about storing and preserving and surviving. And I used to have, Playmobil.
Yeah.
I had basically a Playmobil set that I lived out setting up my homestead fantasies.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
I think that's an awesome idea.
So that I painted my land where I could grow things. I had a train set delivering it. I had it all set up on my bedroom floor on a piece of hardboard. It was great.
That's really
I still
fun.
quite miss it.
That's really good fun. So basically you're a plant lover, we know that, and now you kind of talk about no-dig gardening, and you're a writer and you travel to do talks and whatnot. How did that all begin for you? Where did that all start?
So I was gardening very much to feed my family. I've got 3 kids, and we were, for most of the time, they're all in their 20s now, but most of the time I was a single mum and skint. So I got into growing more and more and more and more food, because then I could feed them lots of vegetables and fruit and things. And it really did help with our budget. So I've always been into doing things as cheaply as you can.
But good food, I have to say, Steph. A lot of people that haven't got enough money, they would reach for really easy stuff like pasta or fish fingers or frozen food. But you're talking about not having much money, but actually growing the best food and vegetables and fruit, which I think is really inspirational, I have to say.
It was, but it does need... I lived in the 2 houses I lived in before where I am now. Both of them, I was able, back then you could actually get a mortgage. Now it's nigh on impossible. But both of them were ex-council houses. And in rural locations, you got a long garden. So the context is I did manage to live somewhere affordable that had a garden. So back in the day, it was like the government policy to have social housing in rural areas with enough garden for the people to be able to be more or less self-sufficient. And obviously it's not the case now. So I wouldn't have been able to do it if I hadn't had that space. I mean, I could have got an allotment, but when you've got very little children and you're on your own, it's really difficult to get to an allotment because they don't want to sit there. I mean,
I can imagine that. Like, even for myself, I don't have children, but actually going to the allotment, which is a bike ride away or a drive away, I have to kind of factor it in my day. So when you've got kids, you have all these other stuff going on. It's really hard, and it must be a little easier to have space in your back garden to grow your own food, for sure. And you were saying about the back of like a council house. I always say, when I was little, I used to do a lot of gardening with my uncle, and he had a council house as well. It was just a lovely long back garden, and he grew so many vegetables in there, with those low fences where you could chat over the fence with your neighbours. And it was just it was a lovely community then of people talking about what they were growing in the garden, almost like an allotment, but
almost like Instagram is now.
It's like the
kind of, isn't it? But a lot, you can almost contact more people and more open. So that's a great side of social media.
Yeah, I like that. And you can chat all over the world. I've met virtually, some really interesting people and people on the other side of the planet. And, so they're harvesting loads of tomatoes when I'm just sowing mine, and we chat about it.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I did get an allotment eventually. But that was, my children were a little bit older. So they'd got beyond being very small and crawling off and eating poisonous things by the time I did that. So I had lots of space. But I've been growing all this food and learning from books. So mostly Jeff Hamilton and what I remembered from The Good Life. And so I was digging it because that's what Jeff Hamilton did. But I've always been organic. I've never used anything horrible. And lots of experimentation and things going wrong. And then, I've lost track of time really, but I think it must have been about 15 years ago. I was looking to get some more paid work and really needed it. And this job came up nearby with this bloke called Charles Dowding picking salad. So I got that job, started as a salad picker. My first day there. The BBC were there filming.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know where anything was. And the camera crews were laughing at me because, like, Charles would be saying, "Oh, go and pick some parsley." And I've remembered this all this time. Clearly, I was so embarrassed because, and the camera crew were laughing because I didn't know where things was. And I'd literally started there that morning. And so anyway, I worked there for 2.5 years and that was like going to university again. So that was how I got into doing no-dig gardening. And I then started doing it at home, obviously, because I was doing it there. And I used to be a teacher. So I'm happy to stand up in front of people and talk because you have to be if you're teaching. So when the opportunity came up to give talks, when I think I've been doing no-dig a couple of years, at alternative festivals and things, I thought, why not do it? Because if you can stand in front of a load of 14-year-olds and tell them about Shakespeare and they're all wishing you'd go away, it's a different thing if you're talking to adults who've actually chosen to be there. Yeah. And being a degree in English meant, obviously, I can write a bit. So the opportunity came up to write and I did that. So it was... Yeah, that's how I got into it, and gradually...
All from picking salad when the BBC were there. Talk about the deep end really early on.
Yeah. It really wasn't at the deep end, that one.
Yeah, you've now authored, numerous books and run courses and speak all over the world about the benefits of no-dig. But before we get into getting kind of the lowdown on no-dig and what it means and how you do it for listeners, I'd love to know what your setup is now, because you very recently moved to the beautiful Welsh countryside, didn't you? And I've been following you on Instagram and Facebook, and it just looks so idyllic. Like, what's it like there now? What's your setup, your gardening setup now in the Welsh countryside?
Okay, so I've got just under 1/2 acre, but that includes the footprint of the house and the sheds and a gravelly bit where we park and that kind of thing. And there's 2 small areas at the front of the house, which I haven't really done anything to apart from put a bird table there, that have shrubby things and a little pond. There's a little triangular bit where I've put some more fruit trees in, but that's pretty much not done anything with that yet. And then the back garden is what I started on first. And that was lawn when I moved here. Now that is entirely beds, dig beds of vegetables. And in the orchard, which we call it the orchard because there's some apple trees in it, that's the biggest area here. That's where I've got more beds, and I'm making beds underneath all the fruit trees. So that's more like a forest garden / no-dig garden. I've got a polytunnel there, a wildlife pond that my son dug a few months ago, and I keep gradually making more and more beds. My son today has been sorting out I've got this massive fruit cage because the wildlife here is very hungry. So without the fruit cage, I will get no soft fruit. So he's covering it at the moment with fine mesh metal wire because that will let the bees through, but hopefully not squirrels, jays, magpies, and everybody else. I will have soft fruit still outside the fruit cage for them to eat. So it's shared, but otherwise I will get nothing. They've eaten all my strawberries.
Oh,
So,
no.
and it's just gradually getting more and more and more space for growing food. My ambition is to try and produce 80% of things that I can, vegetable, plants, herbs, fruit here, and then just have to buy things like coffee, tea, lemons.
Wow.
That's cool. The plan. I'm nowhere near that at the moment, but
that's amazing.
That's lovely ambition. Yeah.
It is. It really is. Yeah, and it's been really quite cool watching you make your new beds, because I know we're going to get into no dig gardening, but when you see a garden that's been no dig for years, you just see it as it is with the vegetables growing. But to actually see you do it, as in I'm literally just laying cardboard on this grass and mulching it, and then watching the progression is really good, especially for people who are interested in no dig and kind of a bit scared to do it.
So
it has been good to do that.
Yeah.
So what is no dig then? Because to a lot of people out there, I know it's quite a big movement, but a lot of people would still assume you have to dig your garden to start it off as a veg garden, but also once a year. But you don't dig at all, because this is the no dig movement. Can you tell us what that is in a big nutshell?
So obviously I dig a hole to plant a tree and that kind of thing. But no, essentially it's about not disturbing the soil as much as humanly possible. So rather than digging the soil over every year, as Jeff Hamilton wrote in his book, and I used to do, I mulch once a year with a bit of compost. I put 1 centimetre or so of compost on my beds every year. That feeds the soil life, and that in turn feeds the plants. So it's working with the soil life in order to produce healthy plants. And it's a lot less work than digging. I'm actually riddled with osteoarthritis, and there's no way I could have done what I've done here almost entirely on my own if I was a digger, because I would have spent far too much time dealing with the consequences of it. So it's a very accessible way of growing too, as well as really good for the planet and really productive. When I started no dig, first found out about it, we didn't know really that much about soil life, apart from wiggly worms or mycorrhizal fungi, or the fact that soil is the biggest carbon sink that we have on the planet. So when you dig, the carbon's released, and if you don't dig, it stays in the ground. And with no idea, absolutely no idea that was a benefit of doing it. And science, joyfully, has been really studying soil and has been showing all these amazing aspects of not digging your soil over. But, there's lots of different ways of doing it. And one of the things I'm doing here is experimenting with mulches that I've not used before, and ways of doing it without compost, because not everybody can get their hands on compost easily or affordably. So,
I love the fact that it's an experiment for you as well. And, when you kind of when you see an expert doing something, you think that they already know all of the answers. It's a constant experiment, anything, isn't it, really, in horticulture? Whatever you're doing is an experiment.
Absolutely.
It's really nice to watch you kind of go through that motion. And what I was going to say about no dig is, how easy is it to try and persuade somebody or influence somebody to give no dig a try? Because honestly, I went no dig 4 years ago when I took on my new allotment, and I went no dig because of you, Steph, of following you and seeing all of your stuff. And even though I was convinced to do it, I was still skeptical about it. I was kind of like, oh, is this going to work? I've been digging for 35 years or something. I'm not. This is odd to me to do it. I don't want to waste a whole year of growing and nothing grow. Of course, everything grew amazingly well. But in the beginning, I was really skeptical still. Like, how you would, when it's so beneficial, and we know how beneficial it is, why is it so hard to persuade people to try it?
I think partly people, if you've learnt it from your auntie or your granddad and things, you've got that family background in this is how I've learned, and you want to continue that. I think some people feel that that they almost would be betraying their Auntie Mary if they didn't dig the garden in the way she did. I think that can be one reason. Another one, I think, is some people just don't like change. Although no-dig is a really, really old way of gardening. It's not new. I've got books on the shelves behind me that were written donkeys years ago, and actually as a concept, it's thousands of years old. It's got its roots all over the planet. But it's become more talked about in recent years. I think, sometimes people they feel almost, because I mean, there's always the risk that I could be like standing there going, actually, you're doing this wrong. And you can grow good vegetables by digging. Of course you can. We see that. You see that in dug vegetable plots. And I think there can be a bit of resistance. I don't want someone telling me I'm doing it wrong. But it's not that you're telling them you're doing it wrong. It's just we've learned more now. So way back when, we had no idea about how much life there is in the soil. Nobody knew, apart from worms and beetles and grubs, because you couldn't see it. We now have the microscopes and we know about it. So it's like anything. I mean, things we've all done things in the past which we wouldn't do now because we've learned that it's not a good thing to do. So you're not actually wrong. It's just things move forwards, don't they? And as we learn, you adapt. And, I'm sure we've all used peat-based compost in the past, but none of us would buy it now. So because we didn't know it was a problem back then.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So I think
that we didn't maybe know the importance of soil as much and how essential it is, So this method of gardening is protecting the soil as well, isn't it?
Exactly, because it's like our most diverse ecosystem on the planet is our soil. And it just doesn't look like it, because if you take a handful of soil, it looks like mud mostly. Yeah. And because we can't see it, if you look at it under a powerful microscope, it is extraordinary what's in there. And also most of the things that are in there have such complicated names. We can't hold them in our heads. It's not like watching birds or bees or butterflies where you can feel more of a connection with them. So yes, I want to plant these things to attract butterflies because I can see them, and that's marvelous. It's more difficult when it is something you're told is there, but you literally can't see it unless you've got £1,000 to spend on a microscope. But we do know this now, mycorrhizal fungi. I mean, who knew about that 10 years ago? And now we all know about it. Most of us can even spell it now. I still have to.
We can say it now. I've got that far.
I know. I do have to check. Because my computer, my autocorrect now knows it, so that's quite good. I talk my phone at, but that connects everything, and it is amazing. It's a form of communication. It's a way of plants getting nutrition. Crucially, with the dry weather we're having, it's a way of keeping moisture in the soil. So. And digging destroys mycorrhizae. So by not digging, you're protecting the network. But the brilliant thing is, if you've got an allotment and you dig your allotment and you're thinking, oh no, I am that mycorrhizae murderer, all you have to do is stop, because the fungi will come in from the edges and it will re-establish, and off you go. So there's always, optimism. There's always a positive thing you can do. And I was actually being asked by somebody today who's taken on an acre, and it's for growing flowers for seeds, and they want for their business, and they want to do it no dig, but they cannot afford to start like I've done here. I mean, imagine 5 centimetres of compost on card for an acre.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. So with something like that, I said, actually set it up, use your plough that you've got access to, set it up, get the beds made, and then you stop. Yeah, because it's like, it's important that you, and so there's not just one way of doing things. It's the ideal is you start a no-dig bed with mulches, but sometimes you take on an allotment and it's got like old bits of cortina and bicycle and things in. And of course you'd have to dig that to get those out. They're not going to levitate out of the ground. So
I had a cooker. I had a cooker on my allotment when I took it on. Literally a full cooker.
Under the ground or what?
Yeah, well, so at the back of the allotment, there was like a massive mound, and it looked like the previous owners had just sort of created an accidental compost bed. It wasn't compost at all, because they'd just chucked all the green waste on it. It had all dried out, and it was massive, literally like a big mound. And I had to get a digger in to remove it all, like a mini digger. And there was a cooker underneath it. There were tires. There were all kinds of different things. Crazy.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Hello, I'm Lorraine and one of the founding members of Cayley Brothers. We talked with Ellen and Michael last season about being mushroom growers and our love of growing, and we wanted to share with you why we do what we do. Growing and gardening has always been an important part of our upbringing. The satisfaction of harvesting and picking what you've grown, from ripe tomatoes to fresh cut flowers, is unparalleled. We started growing because we couldn't get fresh oyster mushrooms in the shops. What we got back was more than we had imagined, not only an abundance of fresh produce, but also a new understanding about the growing process of mushrooms and how integral they are to life around us. We actively encourage anyone to try growing their own. You don't need a dark cupboard or green fingers to get growing, and it's a fascinating experience, regardless of the amount of space you have. We grow our kits in our kitchens and on our windowsills. Mushrooms grow incredibly quickly. So once you've got the conditions right and your substrate is ready to grow, just by introducing fresh air, some water and a little patience, after about a week you should start to see your first baby mushroom pinning. You'll notice these double in size every 12 to 24 hours right up to harvesting. And after a week of growing, your first flush of oyster mushrooms are fully grown and ready to harvest. Oyster mushrooms are incredibly versatile as a mushroom and will grow on a variety of substrates. We use coffee grounds and sawdust as the base of our kits, but you can grow them on logs, on books and rolled up jeans. Once you've harvested your first mushrooms, the texture and smell is probably the first thing you'll notice. They're fairly robust and they have a lovely mild earthiness about them, both of which you don't get from shop-bought or plastic packaged mushrooms. And that's why we're so keen for you to try growing yourselves. There's just something about growing your own food that makes it look, feel and taste better than anything shop-bought. Growing mushrooms is really simple and hugely rewarding, and we hope more people will get growing their own too.
So, Steph, how can somebody start like no dig at home if they have got a relatively small space? I know you said earlier you just lay cardboard on grass and that is how you can start a bed. How does that work, and how long does it take until you can plant into it? And also another aspect, people will be worried about weeds. What do you do about weeds with no dig? So how does someone really start a no dig bed at home on a small scale?
Okay, well, first of all, with the weeds, it depends what the weeds are. And the ones which laugh in the face of no dig are things like docks and brambles. So if you've got docks and brambles, you need to get your spade and get their crowns out. So those ones are like, absolutely, they will grow through everything. Cooch and bindweed will take longer to deal with, but you don't have to dig those out. And it's better not to if you can, because the act of digging cooch and bindweed can break up their root systems, and then each one then becomes many more cooch babies or bindweed babies. So once you've got rid of anything, I mean, if you've got shrubs and things and you don't want them, obviously get those out too. So assuming you've got rid of any docks, brambles, shrubs, then cut the grass on the lowest level that you can, rake the weedy grass, rake that up, chuck it in the compost. And this just helps get everything nice and level, and it helps killing everything off underneath. And then spread cardboard, and you want it to overlap so that, and this is just like normal brown cardboard that packing boxes, things that come through the post. You want it to overlap so there's no gaps. And then what I like to do is water it. And this helps to stick it to the ground beneath. And it's also because I use very little compost on top. I use 5 centimetres to make a new bed, which saves money. It's much more affordable. And it just helps stick everything together. Then you put your compost on top, and then you do the no-dig dance on top, which is literally just moving over it with your feet, firming the compost down. So when I say 5 centimetres, I'm meaning 5 centimetres once you've done the dance. And I have done it with less compost, but this is what I did in the back garden. And then you're good to go. So you can plant everything straight away. So when I moved here, I made my first bed on March 31st, just like that. And I didn't plant straight away because I just moved from Somerset to Wales, and it was March and I had no plants. But 3 weeks later, I had plants to put in, and in they went. If you've got something bigger, like a tomato in a pot, you just make a hole through the cardboard and plant in the soil beneath. You might get the odd bit of grass coming through, but that's what you do. So you can plant straight away. Cooch and bindweed are the sneaky ones, and they will go hello and pop through more than most other weeds. Will just go, oh no, what's happened, and they'll die. And then you need a trowel, or I like to use, those Japanese tools, hori, because also it's quite nice to have one of those because you feel like you're ready for anything.
You feel like you're in a movie kind of thing, like you're a superhero.
Yeah, they do, absolutely. It fits in with my delusions of the life I lead. And remember, my neighbours are mostly sheep, so they don't judge me when I'm swanning around with one of these. They stay out of the way. You just, as soon as you see one pop up, pull it out and chuck it in the compost. Or if you're not confident composting bindweed and cooch, which is reasonable, bucket of water, chuck them in there, drown them, turn them to sludge, then compost them. So keep on top of that if you've got those weeds, which I had in Somerset. I don't here, thank goodness, because... just for the first year. And then if they can't photosynthesize, they'll die. It's as simple as that. Yeah. Mare's tail is one of the ones where it's got tap roots 15 feet. And that one will keep growing. That takes years. But the good thing is with no-dig soil is it's so much easier to pull it. And mare's tail, horsetail, doesn't hurt the plants around. You can still grow everything you want just within this little dinosaur jungle of horsetail. And it's full of minerals, so it makes a good plant food. Another one here, we've got bracken, and that's another one that I would dig out first if it was in the bed, because that one has a big root system. And then off you go, really. I made a bed the other week, which was for yacon and oca, which have been growing in pots. And that one, I put the cardboard down. I made holes through the cardboard to plant the pots. And then I put the compost on. And I only put like a centimetre or so once I tamped it down. And so far, even though we've had rain here in Wales, so far there's been no weeds at all. I was quite happy with that. But I've done 5 centimetres a lot before. I've not done 1 centimetre before. So that's an experiment.
Yeah. I think I'd done like a good, probably based, I think I was aiming for 10 centimetres on the first kind of round of mulching, which I didn't have enough mulch for. So I'm going to go with something like 6-7 centimetres, which is very precise, but I'm sure that's what it was. But now I can't do any more than 3 centimetres on the allotment per year, much less actually, because I don't have that much compost. And I use one which is called Plant Grow, but I'm trying to make my own compost, on the allotment, and I definitely don't have enough of that. And you mentioned about the weeds as well. I have docks that come through all of the time, but you know how hard a dock weed can be to pull up once it's really established. Like you've got to give it a good pull. Well, these come up so much easier in the soil.
You need your superhero knife.
Yeah, you need Steph the superhero. But they do come up so much more easy now after a few years than before, and there are less because you keep pulling them and there will be less. And I think sometimes my allotment neighbours think I am crazy because I have loads. I am that person who's not confident enough to put weeds straight in my compost bin, and so I put them in buckets and tubs and cover them with water, and they stink. But then I put them in the compost and it seems to be fine. But I have all these buckets of weeds just allotment everywhere, and so I do think people are like, wow, she's so lazy, she's not taking her weeds away. And it's
but they think you're crazy for that. They probably think you're crazy because you don't dig your allotment, because I guess most people around you are digging.
Nobody else. There's one lady, and she does no dig, and she is a Steph Hafferty follower. And when I spoke to her the first time, which was a few years ago, she said she'd noticed I was doing no dig, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And we had a whole conversation about it. Apart from her, no one else is. And there's somebody on the plot who always comes over and he always says to me, oh, your plot always looks really neat and tidy, or oh, there's never any weeds. And I say every time, I'm not going to say it again, but this is probably the 100th time I have said it's no dig. Go look it up. I don't know how many more times to say it. The surprise after 4 years of going, oh, you don't have any weeds, or you don't water as much as anyone else.
Mad.
It's like, I can't say it anymore. I've told you why 1 million times. Just try it.
There's no way I would be able, even where I was before, and this is more garden, there's no way I'd be able to look after this. And of course I work. It's not like I'm Margot. I'm not swanning around in my frock, with my little trug picking flowers, which would be quite fun occasionally. It is within the rest of real life of work and family and traveling for work and doing something else occasionally as well, other than gardening. There's no way I'd be able to do it if it was done, because you do get so fewer weeds and it's so much easier to maintain. And less watering and all of those things.
The mulch keeping in the water has helped so much. I do water, especially in this weather, it's had to be watered more, but overall I water much less since doing no dig. And the soil at my allotment is sandy, very sandy as well, but that mulch is keeping in, locking in the water really well. So I'd just love to know your thoughts on the different types of mulch that you can use. Not necessarily which is better unless you've had experience and have decided which you think is better, but just what we can use as a mulch. There's different types available, isn't there, that you can use on a no dig plot? What are all the mulches that we can use?
Okay, well, I think ideally, if you can, homemade compost, just because it's free and it's there in your garden, and it's alchemy, isn't it? You put all your waste in and it becomes this wonderful stuff. In my previous garden where I had my polytunnel and things, I could make enough compost there for everything, to mulch everything once a year, except for sowing compost. So I still bought that in for there. Here, that's one of the things I'm hoping to make enough compost here for the whole garden, eventually, not immediately. I've got to set things up. So compost, and by compost, it means composted anything. So that could be well-rotted manure, it could be well-rotted wood chip, leaf mould that's well-rotted, homemade compost, bought-in compost. I had to buy compost in when I set this garden up, and I was using one which is made from bracken and sheep's wool and comfrey. So there's also council waste compost. Now that can vary enormously. Usually that's pretty cheap, but depending on your local council depends very much on what goes in it and how the quality of it. One thing that seems fairly universal with that is it is composted at a very, very high temperature and usually is quite biologically dead when you get it. And if you can get that 6 months before you want to use it and just let the soil life regenerate it. Because once it's on the ground, like if you put it in a pile, insects and things will start to colonize it. Fungi will start to go in. Nature will start enlivening it. That can also dry out super quickly. So, but it is an option out there for people. Other mulches are things like wood chip, which is a brilliant mulch. It feeds the soil beautifully, great for keeping water in, great for the fungi. But I only use that on things like soft fruit bushes and established perennials, because as it's breaking down and the actual environment it's creates a home for slugs and snails and woodlice, who we all know are our friends and must be cherished. I don't want them where my lettuces are. So in our climate, it might be fine where you are with a sandy soil. I don't know, but I've mostly grown like in Somerset and here where it's quite damp, and it's a good habitat for those creatures. Woodlice like to pretend they don't eat our plants. They're very good. They have a great PR system, and they do. they do eat decaying wood. They are brilliant for that. All slugs, snails, woodlice are crucial for our environment. They're great nutrient recyclers. Yesterday, I had to stop doing what I was doing and just stand still because one of my thrushes was smashing a snail on a stone so she could eat it. And if I didn't have snails, I wouldn't have thrushes. Wouldn't have food. So they are important, but you don't want them where your lettuces are. You don't want them with your newly planted Brussels sprouts. Whereas in other parts of the world, it's fine to use a wood chip mulch on almost anything. So that's good for some things. Grass clippings can be fantastic, again, mostly for perennials for the same sluggy reason. I'm using those a lot more because I didn't have any grass clippings for years in my old garden, because as soon as my kids got old enough and they were going out and hanging out with their mates elsewhere, I got rid of the lawn and put a polytunnel on it. So I'm excited to play with grass clippings now. And obviously they're good for the compost heap too. So I've been using those, and this is an experiment for me. I have used grass clippings with potatoes before in places where I've worked, but here I've mulched some of my potatoes, earthed them up with grass clippings, and they're still growing. So I don't know how I won't know until I harvest them, whether or not that's been okay. You can use things like polythene, and that's a great way of clearing the ground if you've got no compost, because you can, obviously, I'm hoping that one would be able to access an old sheet of polythene that's already there. Don't buy it new. All of mine is, some of it's was used on a lambing shed, 15 years ago or something, and I treasured it. So you can peg that down on the ground, cut holes in it and plant through it, such as squash. And as the squash is growing, you get a crop that year. It covers the polythene, so it doesn't look quite so bad. And then when you harvest the plants and pull back that polythene, you've got a clean bed.
Yeah.
All the weeds are dead. So there's lots of different ways. New experiment for me here is sheep's dags. So when they're shorn, the end of the fleece where basically it's covered in poo. But it's farmers, they either chuck it in a heap, and a kind of never heap, or it gets burnt. So using sheep's dags is, the sheep need shearing. I'm in Wales, so there's everywhere you go, there's sheep. That is a new thing for me, though obviously people have been using it in their gardens for thousands of years. And I'm using it for all kinds of things. I wouldn't use sheep's dags to grow lettuce because you've got literally big lumps of poo, but I'm using it as mulch for squash and to make new beds and in compost. So
cool.
There's many things that you can use. And of course, green manures, which are so exciting. I love green manures.
Yeah.
So how would you use a green manure, and what examples would there be?
So you wouldn't use anything that's really meant for agriculture, such as rye grass, because you can use that in a no-till farming system, because they have crimping machines that go along and kind of crimp it up, and then they have seed drills that can sow through it. But most of us don't have kind of a crimping machine in our garden sheds. So something like that that's really difficult to kill off. It is killing off a bull. You can sheet mulch it with plastic, but it takes ages. So I use things like Phacelia, crimson clover, Persian clover, not red clover, not to get muddled up with red clover. Red clover is a perennial, so that's fine under like your raspberry bushes, but not where you want to grow cabbages. And mustards, agricultural mustards, they're all really good because they, like our climate, they grow beautifully, and usually winter kills them off. So you get flowers on them too, which is great for pollinators and predators. And if the weather doesn't kill them off, you can cut them down at ground level, rake it up, chuck the matter in the compost bin, and the roots have worked really well with the soil all winter and added nutrients and help the soil biology. Another one that's really good to do in the late autumn, about the time you're planting broad beans, is you can actually use broad beans for this. I use field beans because you get bigger packets, it's a bit cheaper. You plant them just like a broad bean. They look like a broad bean, but they are a broad bean. They're a different variety. And so you've got the whole root systems in the soil over the winter time. And then depending on when you want to use the bed the following year, you can either just cut them down, take the stalks, chop those up, put them in the compost. It's extra bulk for your composting system. Leave the roots in the soil to break down, feed the fungi and everything, and then just carry on planting in that bed. Or if you don't need the bed for a while, let's say you're going to put squash in it and you can't put those in till the end of May where you are, then they will flower, which is great for the early pollinators, and they'll produce a bean for you. And even the field beans, you can eat it. A lot of people find them tastier. So you've got this green manure that's doing a great job. And if you've got something like perennials, fruit bushes, that kind of thing, you can chop and drop. I wouldn't do that in my annual veg beds because of Sluggergeddon, but you can if it's perennials.
I truly believe you live in this amazing like fantasy world of like superheroes.
I love
it. And things happening.
You see now why my children think I'm crazy.
I love
it.
But
yeah, that's the exciting thing. And it's like, so I learned no dig just with compost mulches because that's what we knew then. But there's so many other things now, and so many, it's constantly moved. There's the making fermented plant foods, which is ancient. It's thousands of years old from Asia, but that's become more of a thing now. We've got recipes and ways of doing it, and you can, skip mulching your bed for a year if you haven't got the compost. I did that in my old garden if I ran out of compost, and you can use these plant foods that help with the soil and help feed the plants and the soil line. So there's everything. It's constant experiments and finding out new things. It's really exciting.
I think that's like part of like gardening in general though, isn't it? Just like constantly trying something new, just growing something different, a different practice to see how it goes. I'm not going to mulch my allotment, dare I say it, this autumn or next spring. I'm having a year off because I can't afford a whole nother truckload of mulch, and I haven't made enough homemade compost yet, so I'm hoping I might have done for like the year after. So I'll see how that one goes. But again, it's just an green manures. Yeah, I'm going that. Years ago on one single patch, it was like just a square. I used a mustard. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a mustard that I used, and it was full of insects all winter, which was amazing. Like it gave them a home over winter as well. And then I can't remember now. It was a few years ago. You had to cut it back before it flowered, and then turned it in. That was years ago.
Well, the packets will say turn it in. Yeah, because they're assuming you're using a digging method. Yeah. But so what you do with mustard, you just cut it down and rake it up,
right,
and not dig it in.
Even easier.
Even easier. But the brilliant thing about mustards is they will flower, and they'll start flowering really early in the year. And as well as like being nice for bees and things, it brings in the predators. Yeah. And so you're going to get the parasitic wasps, ladybirds, hoverflies, social wasps, all of these creatures that will feast on your bugs. Think, and this is, it really works so amazingly well because obviously mustard is a brassica, and brassica flowers bring in these predators. So as well as feeding your soil, creating bulk for your compost heap, protecting your soil from winter weather, which the mulch does. But if you haven't got the mulch, then this is ideal. And you can chop and drop in the winter time, obviously, because...
Chop and drop, I love that.
Chop and drop.
Yeah, because if you're not putting anything in that bed, the only thing to do is if it's still looking leafy in the spring and before you plant, rake it up and compost it. And then preferably about a week or so before you want to plant, just to give your birds and everything around the opportunity to eat anything sluggy that decided to live in there. Because they do like living in chop and drop.
Chop and drop. Chop and drop. Slug-a-geddon. Super Steph on the plot.
Steph, this is why you make it so accessible, though. It's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah,
you make it fun. Yeah,
it makes it. You're making it fun and interesting, and like and
relatable.
Enthusiastic about it as well. It's kind of infectious, And I think we could honestly sit here and talk to you for so much longer and glean even more information out of you. But we can't, because I'm really mean and I have like a set time that I will only have the podcast.
She's so anal.
I know, Michael really tells me off, but I'm like, no, we have to stop at this point. And also because we would love our listeners to come and find you and follow you and, see what you are doing and read your books and everything. So I guess we can't give everything away. So
that's true.
Yeah, true.
Steph, where can our listeners find you online to find out more information about No Dig?
Okay, so I have a website and also I post on Instagram. I have a fledgling YouTube channel and I post on Twitter and Facebook too. And conveniently, everything is my name. So if you look for Stephanie Hafferty, There's
obviously not that many other Stephanie Haffertys in the world. Or
There's one in North Carolina, do you know?
There's one in North Carolina, a Stephanie.
Yeah, we met virtually once via Facebook or something. But yeah, there's one of the advantages of having a surname that is quite a bit unusual is, it helps.
Okay, so Stephanie Hafferty, you can find the website, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. I definitely recommend you check out Steph. Also, just tell us quickly about your books before we sign off for the podcast today.
Yeah, so I've got The Creative Kitchen, which is entirely plant-based recipes using things that you can grow with. The only exceptions are things like, olive oil or something like that, but all the ingredients, you can grow them or you can go and buy them at Lidl. I actually made sure that things like the tomato recipes, if it was cooked, that if you didn't have fresh tomatoes, the quantity was the same as opening a tin of tomatoes. So you could make it after you'd come in after a long day, that kind of thing. So that's entirely plant-based recipes. The Creative Kitchen, and there's also No Dig Organic Home and Garden, which I co-wrote with Charles, and that's about no dig gardening, and there's also some things you can make and do from what you grow in that too. And I'm working on another book which should have been out last year, but it's not humanly possible to write a book and move house, I discovered. So I'm hoping to have some news about that later on this year.
Well, that's really exciting. I recommend the books. I do have both. Can you tell? I'm like literally girl fanning over Steph now. I have both of the books. The No Dig book has done the rounds in my family, and my 84-year-old stepfather, 84, who has dug his whole life, has changed half of his plot to no dig because he wanted to use the compost that he had on it, and then he's going to transition to use the other half. And at his age, it's really helping him to be able to continue gardening. So it's been really essential for him to keep him going outside and growing vegetables. So thank you for that. And also the plant-based recipe book. I actually have that in North Carolina, not here, because I took it with me. The very few books that I travelled with to North Carolina was that book, but there's loads of really, really delicious and easy to make recipes as well. So I definitely recommend it. Thank you so much, Steph, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, darling.
Thank
Inspiration.
And we really appreciate it. Thank you, and happy no digging, everybody.
Plants and gardens are a huge source of inspiration for artists and designers like me. One of my favourite places to look for inspiration is British suburbia. I'm Emma Britton, decorative glass designer. I particularly love the happy accidental colour palettes nature provides us with, such as a cheeky foxglove peering over a peeling gate, or some hydrangeas in front of a retro mustard garage door. These all feature in my Up the Garden Path collection. Looking to the garden for interior colour inspiration can give us wonderful juxtapositions we wouldn't find looking at colour swatches. My favourite flowers to paint in my glass splashbacks are foxgloves, lupins and foxtail lilies. Just love the shapes of the petals and how imposing and statuesque they are when you bring them inside. They really are the wow factor.
Everything produced by Floret, sponsors of Series 8 of the podcast, is grown by a network of passionate local farmers who make quality and freshness their top priority. Whatever the dish, savour the flavour and make it unfloretable. Michael, at this point, I can only see your forehead.
Yeah, it's one of my best bits.
Your forehead. Now I can only see your.
I can't get this adjusted properly now. So, Ellen, for the gossip today, I think that plants and gardening are not important because we've got a very serious thing that is happening tonight, and it will have happened by the time this episode is released.
Okay, what's
It's the final episode of Neighbours.
In the UK.
How do you feel? Are you going to watch it?
Yeah, absolutely. I am going to watch it. Yeah.
Are you going to dress Kylie or Jason?
I'm more interested in Guy Pearce, to be fair.
Are you going to dress as him?
No.
Oh. I'm going to dress as Kylie or Jason, maybe both.
You've got the Kylie outfit. I've seen your reel dressed as Kylie, so you can wear that. Actually, dungarees and curl my hair. I could be the god Kylie.
But I know this isn't plant content, but I think a lot of our listeners will really relate to this.
Do you?
How is Home and Away still on TV with Neighbours gone?
I don't know. I don't really watch either, but I did used to watch Neighbours when I was younger. I used to love it, so I'm quite interested.
Have you been watching like the run up to the finale though?
No, but there's been so much on social media and online and in the newspaper. So no, I haven't watched it on TV, but there's loads of just like promo for it. So
I had to do that thing where I'm really like gingerly looking at Twitter the last 24 hours because the actual finale was on in Australia last night.
Yeah.
So I was like scared that I would see something that ruined it because I'm genuinely quite excited about it.
Oh, that's so cute. That's so cute. Well, we're recording this just a couple of days before release, so you've got 2 full days of being careful about what you. But
it was really, I think anybody our age, it was really part of our formative years.
It was. Yeah.
In those days, popular culture was popular culture. Like these days, because you've got TikTok or Instagram, it could be. There's a lot more options for what you're interested in, but in those days, it really was that. It was.
I think I said before.
You could not be into it.
Yeah, we're on the podcast. I would love getting home from school, and I would be there ready to put the TV on at 5:35.
5:35.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, I used to really, really enjoy it. Anyway, that's exciting. Hey, loads of lovely plants on the cul-de-sac in Neighbours. So, you know.
Yeah, let's talk about the plants more.
There's the link.
Oh, I tell you what, I was at Hyde Hall briefly today, and they do have the very best New Zealand garden that I've seen anywhere. It's just, have you been? Have you seen
I've been.
Yeah.
It's absolutely beautiful. I love it as well.
The blue
and
sky
the view.
today, it was just heaven.
Yeah.
Literally. And so many different colours and textures and so much lovely brown. Like, I don't know if you know this little plant called Halaragus. We actually started selling it as a kind of like a filler for baskets and borders at Thompson Morgan many years ago. Halaragus Wellington Bronze. And it's got, I can only describe the leaves as brown. Look it up. It's mad. It's so sexy. And of course, you've got all these things like Coprosma, you've got the Soda Panax, Ferox as well, which has got these brown kind of spiky leaves. And then, of course, all the grasses. Oh my God. It's like, it was just so textural and hardly a flower in sight, to be honest.
It's all about the colour and all about the colour of the foliage and the grasses and the texture rather than the actual blooms.
Wild.
And also like the views as well. The views are amazing there. It's like undulating, which is really nice.
Oh my God. And all the like heleniums were really kind of on fleek as well. It's just, and the edible garden, what's it called? The global food garden?
The world, the global.
It's not the World Food Garden. That's the one at Wisley. Don't get that muddled.
No, the Global Food Garden is the one designed by Anne-Marie Powell and is up for an award at the moment. I think today, so you will have missed it by this time's gone out, is the last day to vote for it for an award as well. It's amazing.
Yeah, but that's not at Hyde Hall.
That's at Wisley.
Yeah. I'm talking about the one at Hyde Hall. I wonder if there's a rivalry between them, actually. Because they're kind of similar concepts, but there was some cool stuff. Oh my God, how are your peanuts?
My peanuts are growing. They're very small, but they're growing. Yeah.
Are they in the greenhouse?
No, they're outside, but they've got like cover, like a plastic sort of covering. Yeah. And they've got a few flowers on, and I planted them out really late this year. So it's sort of a bit of an experiment. And if anything comes of these tiny little plants this year, then I'm going to plant them and do it.
Well, they've got them under glass at Hyde Hall. They're along the border, almost like as an edging to the path.
Yeah.
And they're obviously, they're quite happy. They got their little flowers on. And I wasn't sure how they kind of burrow into the ground, but they start to bring out these kind of like little roots, like almost aerial roots that look as if they're about to then pull that plant down underground. Yeah. I think I have to visit again in 2 weeks to see it actually going in. Because it's just so bloody cool.
I thought the same thing. Like I didn't understand the process of how it's
like how it pulls
but it sort of looks like roots, this, like it's sinking in. That's the only way I can really describe it. And I was kind of like, what have I done with them? I was literally like, did I plant them really deep? Because the flowers on these were quite low down as well. But you can see like the process happening. So I'm interested to see if anything comes of them. But I think they should be okay outside this year at least, because we've just had such hot weather. So it's probably been fine for them to be outside. But I've seen some other people like, I can't think of her name now, which is really terrible, but she's like for Gardener's World magazine. She's grown peanuts before. And outside, I think, not undercover.
He had soybeans as well. You know, Matt Oliver, who does the garden there.
Yeah.
His chickpeas failed, though. So you can be really cocky about chickpeas.
I can't I? Because they grow and they were small, but they were chickpeas. Like they they didn't quite. I think
the summer wasn't good enough for them to really pod up, but like they were a lovely looking plant.
Beautiful,
they're not actually tall, your ones, weren't they?
The foliage was lovely. The little flowers were lovely. And I've got soybeans growing again this year, which have really they've come on leaps and bounds over the last few weeks. There's loads of beans in the pods, and I always joke that I read an article ages ago that said you simply cannot grow soybeans in the UK, and I have grown soybeans for a few years on my plot, and they grow and they are completely fine.
You cute little flump. There was a lovely trial of basil there as well, and it looks so strong. It's funny because, and I was talking to Matt about this, sometimes your perceptions of stuff, you need to shift them over the years, because like when I first started like growing stuff or when I first started selecting new products at Thompson & Morgan, like basil, there weren't as many available. They weren't that strong outdoors, blah, blah, blah. So you then get it fixed in your head that you can't really grow basil in borders. But
right, yeah.
actually, when you then see a trial and you see a lot of those newer varieties, how strong they are, this and that, you realise that basil has actually become a fantastic border and bedding plant. And, you know, to grow on a veg patch is really, honestly, you should have seen it. And these gorgeous lettuce-leafed ones as well that, like, you know, if I wind back 20 years, they were kind of like a really weird sort of novelty, but they've become, you know, quite a nice mainstream strain of basil as well. Sorry, I just got to change my trousers, but I'm sure you won't mind.
You're sorry, you're leaving me mid-gossip for the podcast to change your trousers.
I got to get ready for my neighbour's viewing.
You have to change your trousers to watch Neighbours?
Well, I don't want to go in shorts.
What? Hang on a minute. Let's just rewind. You're not watching Neighbours on TV. You're going to a Neighbours. Oh, my gosh. Just so you know, everybody, Michael did just pan to his pants. So I got a fly full. I know some of you will be very jealous of that.
I'm going to watch Neighbours at my friend Lorna's.
So you're actually going to a neighbour's house?
No. I'm in London. And I'm going to my friend Lorna's, who lives in Chiswick, to watch Neighbours.
Okay.
But she's not my neighbour.
Okay. So you have a neighbour's viewing at a friend's house in Chiswick, right?
And I want to change because I just because it's summer, I'm not the sort of guy that just wants to wear shorts all the time, because I think it looks nice in jeans, and you know, just because it's not that hot. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, even when it was 40 degrees, I still wore jeans because it just looks a bit nicer.
You really don't have to explain what you wear.
I don't know what I'm talking about now. But you did that trick, Ellen, where you just stopped talking and I'm just then filling in the gaps and just talking all sorts of rot. You will get bleeped out or not?
I hope so. I hope our editor bleeps that out, because that's really
great. If it doesn't, then you
that will get bleeped out. Okay, well, it's been nice chatting with you, but clearly you're in a rush.
No, I'm not in a rush. I'm just being official. Well, you said you've got someone coming to buy a bike.
I have. Like, they're going to be here any minute now. I have someone coming to buy my old bike.
I put this denim shirt on, because I think I'm dressing as Scott tonight.
Okay, you're Scott. Will Lorna be Kylie?
I think so, yeah. We've got a wig with a perm, which is obviously Charlene/Kylie. But we haven't got a mullet wig, but I think we're going to cut an ABBA wig into a mullet wig.
You're actually going to sit and pretend to be Scott and Charlene?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, that sounds really good fun.
See, you wouldn't do that. You're not fun enough.
Whatever floats your boat, MP. Whatever floats your boat.
So are you going to have dinner with the person that's bought your bike or not?
No, I'm not. Why would I do something? Why would I do that? That's the weirdest thing.
I don't know.
I might tie a bunch of flowers on the handlebars when they take it away, because I've got a billion cut flowers, like way too many. So I might just tie a little bunch on them as a little gift. Anyway. All right. Well, genuinely lovely chatting with you as always.
Yeah.
But you have a neighbour's viewing to go to, so you know.
I do. Sorry, I'm just messaging someone that's not you.
Yeah, so also we're in the middle of the gossip. Not only have you got changed, but you're messaging other people. Showing me your pants, being rude.
Well, you've had my attention for like about an hour and a half since we did an interview as well. Do you like my beard stash, by the way?
It's all right. It's better than just a moustache. I don't like just a moustache. But just because I don't like moustaches, I don't mean you, but just in general.
Moustaches.
Apart from on Miles Teller, who played Rooster in Maverick, because he is hot with a moustache or without a moustache. He's called Miles Teller. Look him up. Google Miles Teller.
I'll do even better than that. I'll look him up on Instagram.
That's
like Google Plus. Teller, Teller.
Teller. Miles Teller. He played Rooster. in Maverick, which I absolutely loved, and I thought he was amazing. I think that.
Oh, he doesn't have an account. He's only got weird fan accounts. I'll have to actually Google him.
Yeah, but I actually think he looks really cute with the moustache. Okay, going now. I do have a bike to get rid of. So nice chatting, and have a super evening.
All right, cowabunga.
Bye.
Bye. The music for the Plant Based podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.